Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding. Dramatised in 4 episodes by John Scotney, with June Barry, John Franklin Robbins, Cornelius Garrett and John Rye.
The first part, which treats of the death of Sir Thomas Booby, with the affectionate and mournful behaviour of his widow, and the great chastity of Joseph.
Chastity.
Chastity.
Ah, yes. Chastity.
What?
Nay, is not male chastity as becoming to the human species as female? Yet the character of a chaste man is a thing few authors among the moderns have seen fit to dwell upon.
Whilst female chastity is everywhere to be found, at least in the bookshops.
Who has not heard of the celebrated chastity of sweet, dear, pretty Pamela Andrews?
So admirably recorded by Mr. Samuel Richardson in his Pamela.
Oh, virtue rewarded.
Pamela, a pretty 15-year-old servant girl, artlessly sets down how she virtuously resisted all manner of lewd and lustful assaults by her master, including an attempted rape.
Which she describes in some detail.
Until, defeated at last by her chastity, her master offered her the joy of becoming his wife.
And so was able legitimately to enjoy those attentions he had so often attempted to force on her in vain.
Such a theme is the soul of religion, good breeding, and morality in our present age, and the pulpit, as well as the coffee house, has resounded with Pamela's praise.
But what of her brother? Mr. Joseph Andrews, who by keeping his sister's virtues ever before his eyes
and attending to the wise advice of the Reverend Mr. Abraham Adams,
was also able to preserve his chastity in the face of as many and greater temptations as were placed before his sister.
Who has heard of him?
Who, among those thousands to whom the name Pamela Andrews is now so familiar, has heard of Joseph Andrews?
To correct the which omission, we now present before the public the authentic
History of the Adventures of Joseph Andrews and his friend Mr. Abraham Adams, as faithfully recorded by your servant, Mr. Henry Fielding, gentleman. Our history opens in the year of grace 1737 upon a Sunday morning in summer, as Parson Adams walks through the churchyard receiving the bows and salutations of his flock.
or as he was pleased to regard them, his children. Ah! Goody Wilkins, how's the fever?
Oh, much better, ain't it, please, Your Honour? That poultice you gave me were a real wonder.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Now, Tom, you come here.
Yes, Mr. Adams? Your Honour?
I hear you were out poaching again last night, Tom.
Your Honour. I'm very sorry, Your Honour.
Such was Mr. Adams' nobility of character that his word was law in his parish, and within its bounds his spiritual authority was as absolute as is the Pope's in Rome. For Mr. Adams was a man of good sense, good parts, and good nature, though, to say the truth, he had no more knowledge of the ways of the world than has a babe newly entered into it. The village where this amiable gentleman had the cure of souls lay near the gates of Booby Hall,
the country seat of Sir Thomas Booby, Baronet, in the county of Somersetshire. Every Sunday morning, Sir Thomas drove with his wife in the coach and six to attend divine service conducted by Mr. Adams, though he was not today in a very reverent humour. Pox take my head! It aches abominably. Something devilish wrong with the claret at supper last night, madam.
The Lady Booby, when not as usual in London, accompanied Sir Thomas to church with the charitable object of educating her country neighbours in the new fashions current at the capital. Indeed, sir. How strange you did not observe the claret was bad at the time. You drank so much you had ample occasion to do so.
Look ye here, madam. I'll bear no carping from you, or I'll maybe take young Andrews back from ye. Devil knows how you wheedled him from me in the first place. Must have been in drink, damn it.
Are you ever otherwise, dear husband? But my dear, you will agree he makes a mighty handsome figure behind the coach in his new livery.
The footman saw young Andrews was the best horseman in my stable. I was counting on him to ride Duke for me against my brother John's man.
That he cannot, my dear, for I am taking Joey to London with me.
Oh, Joey is it now? Well, you may do as you please, for you was always the wilfulest of women. There's that damned curate. I must have a word with him. Adams! Adams! Mr. Adams!
Sir Thomas, may I help you down?
Thank you. Now, harkye, Adams. Your sermon today, what's it to be like?
I shall preach against the silly passion of vanity, Sir Thomas.
Vanity, eh?
Yes, my sermon on vanity is one of which I am particularly proud, and I may confidently affirm you will admire it.
A fig for what's in your sermon, sirrah. How long will it be?
Not long at all, Sir Thomas. Hardly above an hour and 20 minutes.
In Christian charity, Mr. Adams, make it shorter, I pray you. I was up devilish late last night after the quarter sessions. Lord knows what the county's coming to. Now it takes twice the time it did to hang a man.
I will endeavour to oblige you, Sir Thomas, as best I may, but now you must excuse me. I must prepare myself for my sacred duty.
Yes.
I beg your pardon,
Yes,
madam.
yes, Adams.
Call himself a clergyman. What about the dignity of the cloth? Dammy, did you see that periwig, madam? Looks as though it came off a scarecrow, and the cassock from off a gibbet. Lord knows what the neighbours think.
Oh, country neighbours, Sir Thomas. Brutes! Mere brutes. Their opinions, if they're capable of holding any, do not concern me.
Morning service opened as usual with Sir Thomas standing up in his pew and balefully surveying the congregation to ensure all were present.
Yes, good, that's all right. All right, Adams.
I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before my eyes. Dearly beloved brethren, the Scripture moves us in sundry places to acknowledge and confess.
Lady Booby seemed to have rather more converse with the handsome young footman who carried her prayer book than was perhaps strictly essential to his handing over that book. Then she composed her face into a mask of decorous devotion and privily read a French romance under cover of the prayer book. Presently, Sir Thomas succumbed to a profound slumber, induced by the public labours and private potations of the day previous. Only waking to join Adams in the prayers for his majesty.
Most heartily we beseech thee with thy
favour to behold our most gracious sovereign Lord King George. God bless him, and perdition to the Pretender, and all Tory Jacobites.
And so replenish him with the Holy Spirit, that he may always incline to thy will.
How shall the young preserve their ways from all pollution free?
During the singing of the psalm, Mr. Adams' attention was drawn by the excellent voice of the new young footman attendant on Lady Booby, and by the young man's rapt attention during his sermon on vanity,
which was indeed full of wisdom and high learning, and would surely have turned his hearers from that vice for ever, had they been able to understand a single word of it. Adams determined to speak with the young footman after the service.
Sir Thomas, I wonder what...
Damn sight too long, Adams.
Sir Thomas?
Your sermon, man.
And how would you know, my dear, since you slept through its entirety? Mr. Adams?
Lady Booby, will you be so kind as to allow...
Come along, Joseph. Come along, Joey.
Excuse me, young
Mr.
Joseph...
Adams! Oh, what a remedial dissipation. What theological and classical apprehension.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Slipslop.
Mrs. Slipslop, my lady's waiting gentlewoman, being herself the daughter of a curate, preserved some respect for Adams, and professed great regard for his learning.
And indeed he was an excellent scholar, a perfect master of the Greek and Latin languages, to which he added a knowledge of the Oriental tongues, and could read and translate French, Italian, and Spanish. These qualifications and his other virtues had so much endeared him to his bishop that at the age of 50 his preferment had not advanced beyond his curacy, which provided him with a handsome income of £23 a year.
Mrs. Slipslop, that young man with Lady Booby, who is he?
Young man, Mr. Adams?
The young fellow in livery.
Oh, that's my lady's new footman.
Lady Booby seems very attached to him. Is he a respectable fellow?
Oh, la, Mr. Adams. Joey is the very paragraph of virtue. He is one of the genteelest young fellows you would see on a summer's day.
Joey?
He is called Joseph Andrews. And though he is but recently...
Slipslop!
Oh, come in, madam. Mr. Adams, there are several matters I would like to concuss with you. Pray come to the Hall on Tuesday, and I will take the opportunity of acquainting you with Joey. I warrant you'll find him the very epigram of...
Slipslop!
Oh, larks a mercy, my lady is so opportune. Come in, madam!
On the Tuesday following, Mr. Adams presented himself at the kitchen of Booby Hall, where he drank a cup of ale with Mrs. Slipslop.
While she refreshed herself with a dish of her mistress's tea. On these occasions, she loved to dispute with Adams on points of theology.
Indeed, it was only after a pretty long discourse on the essence...
Or, as she pleased to term it, the incense...
of matter, that Adams was able to turn the subject to Joseph.
Very true, Mrs. Slipslop. But pray inform me. Young Andrews, I do not recall seeing him in church before.
Oh, nor would you have done, Mr. Adams. Joey was born and appraised on the estate of Sir Thomas's nephew, Squire Booby. He was bound apprentice to him according to the statute when he were 10, and the squire employed him as a bird scarer.
And did he work hard at his duties?
Oh, consumptuously, but he did not prosper.
Why not?
His voice was so extremely musical, it rather allured the birds than horrified them, and he was transported.
Transported? For such a small offence?
Transported from the fields to the dog kennel, and placed under the huntsman, as what the vulgarity calls a whipper-in.
And in this he thrived?
Marry, he did not, Mr. Adams. That same sweetness of his voice disquantified him, for the dogs preferred the sound of his chiding to all the notes of the huntsman, and this incinerated the huntsman so much that he desired Mr. Booby to provide otherwise for him. So Sir Thomas took him and placed him in the stable.
And did his voice betray him in this office too?
Oh, quite the contrariety, Mr. Adams. Young Joey surprised everyone by his great strength and agitation. Oh, here's the fellow hisself. Now, where have you been, Joey? Here is Mr. Adams, come on purpose to meet you.
As the best cooks begin at first by setting plain things before the hungry guests, rising by degrees to the very quintessence of sauce and spices, so we held off until now from introducing our main dish, the hero of our history. But now, at last, our hero comes.
Mr. Adams, I'm very sorry I'm late, sir.
Well, I hope you are, Joey. Fancy showing such confidence to your betters.
I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Slipslop. Only I were writing a letter to my poor sister, Pamela. She's much distressed at the sudden death of her dear mistress.
So she should be, for she will certainly lose her place.
No, Mrs. Slipslop. Her master's kindness itself to her. He's promised to keep Pamela on, and has even given her some of his late wife's clothing to be altered for her.
Has he so?
Joseph, you said you were writing to your sister. Now, who wrote the letter for you?
Sir?
Who penned it for you?
Oh, why, no one, sir. I can both read and write. For my dear gaffer was at the expense of 6pence a week to get me my learning, though he did somewhat regret he could not purchase as much tobacco as formerly in consequence.
But this is wonderful indeed. And what books have you read, Joseph?
I have read The Whole Duty of Man.
Excellent, excellent.
And I read The Imitation of Christ by St. Thomas a Kempis.
Mirabile dictu. And the Bible, Joseph, do you read your Bible?
Oh, I trust I know my Bible as well as the next man, Mr. Adams.
At which Adams took the opportunity to question Joseph concerning several particulars of Christian learning, as
how many books are there in the New Testament? What are they?
And even such profound theological questions as
how many chapters do they contain?
To all of which Mr. Adams privately considered Joseph answered much better than Sir Thomas could probably have done.
But Joseph, do you not extremely regret not having been born of parents who might have indulged your talents and desire for knowledge?
Mr. Adams, I hope I have profited somewhat better from the books I have read than to lament my condition in this world.
Well said, my lad. But, Mrs. Slipslop, you have the ear of Lady Booby, do you not?
Marry, Mr. Adams, I confess she does repress some confidence.
Joseph must not waste his abilities by going to London as a footman. Pray prevent it. I will myself undertake Joseph's instruction in the Latin and Greek languages, that he may qualify himself for a higher station in life than that of a footman.
Mr. Adams!
Mr. Adams, do you think my lady will suffer any preambles about any such matter? I am confident she would not leave Joey behind on any account. She would as soon think of parting with a pair of her grey mares.
But
and
Mrs.
as for Latin, I am sure it is very proper that you clergyman must learn it, because you cannot preach without it. But I have heard gentlemen in London say it is fit for nobody else.
Mrs. Slipslop, it shall not be.
Slipslop? Slipslop! Where the devil are you, you silly bit?
Oh, there is my lady's bell. Pray excuse me, gentlemen.
In the months before Joseph was to leave for London, there was fought a conflict between the spiritual power in the person of Mr. Adams and the temporal power in the person of Lady Booby, worthy of comparison with that between St. Thomas Becket and the Plantagenet King. And since we are a truthful historian, we must recall that our hero, Mr. Adams, was the loser, though happily he did not, like his predecessor, suffer martyrdom for his cause. Even on the day of Lady Booby's departure, the parson hastened to the hall to try to dissuade Joseph from leaving. The arrangements were being supervised by Mr. Peter Pounce, Sir Thomas's steward.
Postilion! Postilion! Joseph! Joseph Andrews! I beg you to...
Mr. Adams, I'll just...
Now, Joseph, you are about to...
Joseph, the postillion's nowhere to be seen. Mr. Adams, your servant.
Mr. Pounce.
Joseph, be a good fellow. Joseph, why have you got those chickens? Are there no chickens in London? Put them down and take this portmanteau. Groom,
sir,
get the horses to the bell.
Tom, help us with the cattle. And you, John.
Yes, Mr. Pounce. Mr. Adams?
Now, Joseph.
Joseph, the chickens! Oh, what's the matter with the horses, man?
They're afraid of chickens, sir. Hold him, Tom. Hold him! Oh, where's that bastard?
We'll try to keep them away from... Oh, no.
Oh, Mr. Adams! Mr. Adams! Are you home, Mr. Adams?
Just a few fellas. Oh. No, Joseph. I have come to warn you...
Adams, what are you doing here?
Sir Thomas, my duty to you. I must entreat you, Sir Thomas...
Look at you, man. You're covered in feathers. And what's that? Egg. My dear sir, you really should set a better example. Ah, Joseph, don't just stand there, man. Help the men with the horses. Now, Pounce. All well? All is proceeding smooth here, Sir Thomas.
Mr. Pounce, a word.
What's that woman doing? What's the matter with the horses? Where's the postilion?
Peter? Sir Thomas, Mr. Adams. Mr. Pounce,
Ma'am?
my lady sends to ask, are the provisions stowed?
Joseph, leave that and get that hamper into the jogging basket. There, Mrs. Slipslop. There should be a couple of boiled fowls, some pickled pork, a cold plum pudding, and half a dozen of Rhenish wrapped in damp straw. Is that all? She'll starve. That is to partake on the journey. I have sent ahead to command dinner at the Bell in Salisbury.
No, Mr. Pounce, the provisions.
Oh. At least a pint of brandy, 2 pints of Nantes, and a flask of Holland in a red leather chest marked Physic. It is beneath
her ladyship's seat.
Capricious Mr. Pounce. Mr. Adams, are you here to solidify our vagrination?
No, I'm
Mr.
here.
Adams, I'm sorry I was called away. The postillion's not yet arrived. You had something you wished to say to
Yes,
me.
Joseph. Now mark what I say. I earnestly entreat you...
Joey, Mr. Adams, what brings you here?
Lady Booby, this poor unfortunate young man
Joseph, you will travel inside the coach, Joseph, with Mrs. Slipslop, Mr. Pounce and myself.
But my lady...
The journey is tedious, and we may require you to read us an improving book to help pass the time.
Yes, my lady.
Now, help me into the coach, Joseph. Well, take my arm.
Yes, my lady.
Oh, Joey, thank you. I'm so clumsy. Now, Joey, are you familiar with whisk?
My lady?
Oh, no matter, Slipslop will instruct you. It is a card game, Joseph. A card game that requires 4 players. Why, dear husband, are you here to see us safely away?
You could say that, madam. Though why you should always be getting away to London, I cannot comprehend.
Oh, the pleasures of the town, the play, the park.
Well, as for the play, we had the strolling players here at Christmas. And as for the park, why, you have 500 acres of parkland here to disport in.
Yes, if one would converse with mutton, beef, or venison, or husbands. But, my dear, it is immeasurably fond of you to come to wish me farewell. Slipslop, Mr. Banks.
Lady Booby.
Is all in readiness for our departure?
It is, my lady.
Then where the devil, Mr. Pounce, is the postilion?
No sooner was young Andrews arrived in London than his appearance was taken in hand. At the express command of Lady Booby, his hair was dressed in the newest fashion.
Truly a Grecian chevalier, my dear sir. Such sumptuous locks. Gives me unspeakable pleasure to dress it. There, 'tis done. I hope it meets with your approbation.
Joseph's hair, in truth, became his chief care. He went abroad with it all morning in papers and dressed it out in the afternoons. But if he was outwardly a pretty fellow, yet his morals remained entirely uncorrupted. His fellow footmen could not bring him to game or swear, nor could all the efforts of his party-coloured brethren induce him to take strong drink.
Hey, Joey. Will you join us in a flash of lightning?
A flash of... My apologies, Mr. Grogblossom, but you have me at a disadvantage.
Bob's the coxcomb.
The spark!
God, Joey, a spot of Nancy Clark, Hodge's best.
Mr. Mockgallant, I'm sorry.
Holland, Joey. Holland, a drop of gin, Joey. Will you take a drop of gin? A drop of gin, the old girl sighs, blue ruin sparkles in her eyes, and while she prays to keep from sin, finds comfort in a drop of gin.
I'm mightily obliged to you, Mr. Grogblossom, but my singing master has forbidden me all drink but tea. Oh, and small beer.
Indeed, Joseph applied most of his leisure hours to music, in which he greatly improved himself.
He soon came to lead the opinion of all us footmen concerning the opera. Joey, my cuz, what is it you are perusing?
Oh, a fine thing, Mr. Grogblossom. Mr. Gay and Mr. Leverage's song of Black-Eyed Susan.
Oh, I regret I'm not familiar with it, Joseph. You would oblige me infinitely if you would honour us with a snatch.
Your servant, sir. All in the downs the fleet was moored.
It was not long before it was agreed by all his fellow footmen that Joseph was smarter and more elegant than any of the beaux in town, either in or out of livery, an opinion with which his lady concurred.
Joey is the handsomest, genteelest footman in the kingdom. Such is the effect of the town air on him, Slipslop.
Lady Booby would now admit Joseph to deliver letters to her bedside.
Thank you, Joseph. Bring it to me. Here, Joey.
She leered at him at table.
Joseph, more wine. Come, fill me up.
And, in short, indulged our Joey in all those innocent freedoms which a woman of figure may permit to us footmen.
Without the least sully on her virtue. She would now often walk with him into Hyde Park in the morning, and, when tired...
Which happened almost every minute.
She would lean on his arm, clasping his hand tightly.
But though her virtue remained unsullied, yet some small arrows did glance within its shadow. One morning, Lady Tittle happened to meet Lady Tattle in the park.
Lady Tittle. Lady Tattle, I am rejoiced to see you, my dear. Lady Tattle, I am no lover of scandal and no hypocrite. But do you not observe...
Lady Booby, Lady Tittle?
Walking arm in arm with... Oh, can I believe my eyes?
Surely, Lady Tittle, but what makes you so surprised?
But is that not her footman?
Oh, an old business, I assure you. Is it possible you have not heard of it, Lady Tittle? The whole town hath known it this half-year.
But whatever suspicion the scandalous inclination of defamers might entertain, they made no impression on Joseph, who never offered to encroach beyond the liberties his lady allowed him.
A behaviour which she imputed to the violent respect he preserved for her, and which served only to heighten a something she began to conceive.
And which we intend soon to open a little farther. But first, our scene returns to rustic matters among the fields and woods of Somersetshire, for at this time an accident happened which put a stop to Lady Booby's agreeable walks with Joseph in the park. A new turnpike road had recently been completed near Booby Hall, and Sir Thomas, who had invested in the venture, determined to make trial of it late one evening after supper.
Sir Thomas, it's confoundedly wet out here.
And dark, Tommy. It's devilish dark. Way up is away. Now, this way, bring the lantern, and then now, our course lies somewhere here.
Here, Sir Thomas.
Ah, James, William, whatever your name is, you pox-ridden ruffian. Is the horse saddle? Is it? Huh?
It is, Sir Thomas.
Here's my 10 guineas. Says I'll be in Bath in time to take the public stage back here tomorrow.
20 says you will not, sir.
There, 50. 100. 1,000, if you dare, sir.
Done. 1,000 it is, sir. Guineas.
My dear old Tommy, are you sure you're fit to ride? You take the prodigious amount of... 6 bottles of port. Nothing, sir, nothing. Molly, you tell him how well I ride on a few bottles of port, eh? Hey, Molly, hey, don't I, Molly?
Oh, Sir Thomas! Oh, la! What will my mistress think?
She's well away in London, God bless her. Now, you observe the advantage of the turnpike, gentlemen. Gets me wife away from me damnably quicker.
And brings her back quicker, Tommy. There's that too.
Aye, there is that misfortune. Now, where's the damned horse gone?
Here is your horse, sir. Here, let me, sir.
There's no need to help.
Stirrup, sir, Sir Thomas.
Good Lord. Fell over.
Here, Sir Thomas. Let me help. Sir Thomas, Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy.
Leg up. Right. In my eye. Nothing to it.
I'll open the gate, sir.
Gates, leave it to me, man. I'll jump it. Tally-ho!
But Sir Thomas, wait, you've got...
All might have been well for Sir Thomas had he not, in his befuddled state, forgotten, and in the darkness failed to observe, the somewhat low stone arch, in the Gothic manner, that Lady Booby had recently caused to have erected over the gateway.
Tommy! You all right, Tommy? You're not hurt, are you?
Hurt? Here's 50 guineas, says he's a dead man, sir.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
If you'll pardon me, gentlemen.
Yes, what is it, fella?
Shouldn't we call the surgeon, my lord?
A surgeon was summoned and hastened to the hall, but even the large fee he was promised did not enable him to cure his patient, who had indeed already departed this life when he arrived.
The Lady Booby received the news of her husband's death in a letter that arrived with her morning chocolate, which it chanced that Joseph was serving. Having carefully put down her cup, she abandoned herself to grief. And fainted quite away. In Joseph's arms.
Mrs. Slipslop! Mrs. Slipslop! Mrs. Slipslop! Help!
Looks a mercy, my lady. What is it? Fie on you, Joey. What have you done?
Oh, Slipslop. Oh, my dear, dear Mrs. Slipslop. Thank heaven you are here to console me.
For 6 days, Lady Booby was so disconsolate that none were admitted to her save Mrs. Slipslop and 2 female friends, whom she counted among her closest allies and confidants.
Ah, Lady Tittle, Lady Tattle.
Mrs. Slipslop. Dear Mrs. Slipslop, yes, how is she?
Oh, she is truly very consolable, Lady Tattle, but I'm sure she will be conscientious to seeing you. Pray, do enter.
And even these intimate friends of her bosom were only admitted into her presence because, as was previously remarked, whisk is a game that requires 4 players. However, on the 7th day, these companions too were banished.
I am much fatigued with weeping and wish to be alone with my memories.
After she had rested some minutes, long enough to ensure that her companions had left the house, Lady Booby felt a great yearning.
For tea. Joseph, bring the tea kettle.
When he brought it, my lady, being in bed, called Joseph to her and bade him sit down on the bed.
Where, having accidentally laid her hand on his, she asked, Joseph, have you ever been in love?
Joseph answered with some confusion, Madam, surely, madam, it's time enough for one as young as I to think on such matters, madam, my lady.
As young as you are, I am convinced you are no stranger to passion. Come, Joey, tell me truly, who is the happy girl whose eyes have made a conquest of you?
Madam, I declare all women are equally indifferent to me, madam.
Oh, you are a general lover. But yet you shall never persuade me that your heart is so insusceptible to affection. I rather impute what you say to your secrecy, a very commendable quality. Nothing can be more unworthy in a young man than to betray any intimacies with the ladies.
Ladies? Ladies, madam? Oh, I'm sure I never had the impudence to think of any of that quality.
Don't pretend to too much modesty, Joseph. But prithee, suppose a lady should happen to like you. Answer me honestly, Joseph. Can you keep a secret, my Joey?
Madam, I hope your ladyship can't tax me with ever betraying the secrets of the family, and I hope, if you was to turn me away, I might have that character of you.
Joey, my Joey, turn you away. Oh, I'm afraid that is not in my power. Not you, Joey. Not my pretty Joey.
Madam, my lady, madam.
Yes, Joey?
Your
Am I what, Joey?
Your bosom, madam.
Yes, Joey. What of my bosom?
It is exposed, my lady. Oh.
La! So it is! Oh, Avert your eyes at once. Oh, there. Oh, Joey. Joey, what am I doing? Oh, to have trusted myself naked in bed with a man alone. Naked in bed, Joey. Naked. I suppose you should have any wicked intentions upon my honour. How should I defend myself? And me, naked, in bed.
No, madam, no. I could never have the least evil design against you.
No, perhaps you may not call your designs wicked, and perhaps they are not so.
Well, I swear they're not.
Yet I must have reason to suspect you, Joseph. Are you not a man? Am I not a woman? And without vanity, I may pretend to some charms. Joey, you know I am of a forgiving temper. Tell me, Joey, don't you think I should forgive you if you should venture to...
Indeed, madam. I will never do anything to disoblige your ladyship.
How? Do you think it would not disoblige me, then? Do you think I would willingly suffer you? Get you downstairs!
Madam, I would not have your ladyship think evil of me. I have always endeavoured to be a dutiful servant, both to you and to my poor dead master.
You, thou villain! Why didst thou mention the name of that dear man? Unless to torment me, to bring his precious memory to my mind. Get thee from my sight! I will never endure thee more!
Oh, madam, Madam!
The disconsolate Joseph retired to his own garret, and truly he would not have had an understanding sufficient to our principal subject if we were to allow him any longer to misunderstand his mistress's drift.
Dear Sister Pamela, hoping you are well. What news I have to tell you. Dear Pamela, my lady has a mind to me. She ordered me to sit down on her bed when she was naked in bed, and she talked exactly as a lady does in a stage play, which I have seen in Covent Garden, when she wanted her sweetheart to be no better than he should be. I'm sure she intended to ruin me. Mr. Adams has written me that chastity is as great a virtue in a man as in a woman. Indeed, it is owing entirely to his excellent advice, together with your letters, that I've been able to resist temptation. But I am glad she turned me out of the chamber as she did, for I'd almost forgotten every word Parson Adams ever wrote to me. Your loving brother, Joseph.
Joey? Joey? Where are you off to?
Oh, Mrs. Slipslop, I was just about to dispatch this letter to my sister Pamela.
Good boy, Joseph. You are truly most fratricidal. But will you not drink a glass of something good first?
Oh, thank you kindly, Mrs. Slipslop. I will. My spirits are a little cast down at present.
Fie, a good glass of ratafia will soon distend that, Joey. Pray, come through to the closet.
Before we pursue them thither, let us first take the opportunity of better acquainting you with Mrs. Slipslop.
Mrs. Slipslop was a maiden gentlewoman of about 40. Well, about 45 years of age. Of an age, at least, where she felt she could indulge herself with a man without the danger of bringing a third party into the world. Having made a small slip in her youth, she had continued a good maid ever since, and felt she had laid up a quantity of merit sufficient to excuse any future failings.
She was not remarkably handsome, being very short and corpulent and somewhat red and pimply in the face, and having one leg shorter than the other, and hence had chosen to woo Joseph, on whom she had long cast eyes of affection, by means of tea, sweetmeats, wine, and other delicacies, of which, by keeping the keys, she had absolute command.
You, Joseph? Join me in another glass.
But, Mrs. Slipslop, I've already...
Take one of these sugar plums. They are notoriously apacific for the melancholier. Oh, dear Joey, what has transgressed to discomforts you? Here, come, drink up.
Yes, Mrs. Slipslop.
No, Joseph, you must drain it to have its full virtue, like this. There. See? I have finished mine.
Yes, ma'am.
There. There now. Some more, Joey.
No, pray.
No? Then let us try some muscatel instead.
Very well, ma'am. Oh, Mrs. Slipslop, I cannot...
Can you not? Are you sick? Here, I will finish it for you. There now. If you are sick, Joseph, I have a sovereign remedy. Hot arrack punch, the kettle is boiled, and there is some good cold raisin pudding to go with it.
No, thank you, Mrs. Slipslop. You're too kind.
Kind, Joseph, kind, yes, perhaps I am. Yes. Dear Joey, dear Joey. Nothing can be more simple contract in a woman than to place her affections in a boy.
Do you refer to my lady, madam? Well, how did you...
Lack a day, my lady. I should have wished to die 1,000 deaths rather than to see that day. No, Joseph, I speak of another. But we who know the world, if we like a boy, the lightest hint sophisticates. Does it not, Joseph?
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam. Do you intend to result my passion? Is it not enough ungrateful as you are for these favours I have done you? But you must treat me with ironing, barbarous monster. How have I deserved that my passion should be treated with ironing?
Madam, I don't understand your hard words. For so far from intending you any wrong, I have always loved you as well as if you'd been my own mother.
How's it? Your mother? Do you insinuate that I am old enough to be your mother? Well, it is a heyday. I ought to despise you for referring the conversation of young girls to that of a woman of sense.
Madam, I am sure I have always valued the honour you did me by your conversation, for I know you are a woman of learning.
Yes, Joseph, that is true. That is very, very true. I see there is indeed some true disinclination in you. Oh, Joey, my eyes, whether I would or no, must declare the passion I cannot conquer. Oh, kiss me. Oh, kiss me, oh, Joseph.
Mrs. Slipslop, the bell.
Oh, Joseph.
The bell, Mrs. Slipslop.
Oh, Joseph. Oh, damnation.
It is my lady's bell, Mrs. Slipslop.
A pox on her goddamn bell.
Slipslop? Where the devil are you?
Coming, Lady Booby. Damnation. Damnation. Damnation.
Enter.
You rang for me, madam?
Yeah, Slipslop. When did you last see Joseph?
Joseph, madam? I have not seen him this morning, madam.
I'm afraid he is a wild young fellow.
Oh, yes, that he is, madam, and a wicked one, too. To my knowledge, he games, drinks, swears, and fights eternally. Besides, he is horribly indicted to wench him.
I never heard that of him.
Oh, madam, he is so lewd a rascal that if your ladyship keeps him much longer, you will not have a virgin in your house. Save myself, of course.
Of course. So, he's a lecherous gallant, is he? Well, we must discard him before he debauches the whole household. You may pay him his wages, instantly.
Oh dear. Would your ladyship consider, for perhaps he may mend, for the boy is really a strong, healthy, luscious boy, madam.
Today?
Well, I would wish, madam, your ladyship might be so good
No,
as
slips up, I am resolved.
Oh, then, madam, I am sorry for it. If you turn away every footman that is a lover of the sport, you must soon open your carriage door yourself, or get a set of Mophrodites to wait upon you. And I am sure I hated the sight of them even singing in an opera.
Slipslop, do as I bid you, and don't shock my ears with your beastly language, or this house is no place for you.
Marry, come up, people's ears are sometimes the nicest part of them. Why, madam, I know what I know. Some folks don't need a spyglass to see which way the wind blows.
Slipslop? What has Joseph...
Madam?
What do you know, mistress?
I am not obliged to tell that to anybody, any more than I am obliged to keep silent.
Oh, Mrs. Slipslop, my dear Mrs. Slipslop, why will you? You, who know better than any my passionate temper, why will you provoke me? Dear, honest Slipslop,
Yes, madam?
I have a silk gown that I no longer wear, that I am sure, with alteration, would fit you well. And a petticoat. And as for Joseph, I will examine him myself. You may send him up. But I am resolved in one thing, Slipslop, and in that I am obdurate. Joseph Andrews shall be dismissed.
Oh, love, what monstrous tricks dost thou play with thy votaries of both sexes? How dost thou deceive them, and make them deceive themselves? But yet, before Joseph is admitted and we discover to you the frailty which so nearly allowed Lady Booby's passion to get the better of her reason, it will be proper to give our public a lively idea of the vast temptation to which she was exposed, the uncommon variety of charms which united in Joseph's person, and which almost overcame all the efforts of Lady Booby's modest and virtuous mind.
Mr. Joseph Andrews was now in the 20th year of his age, and in the highest degree of middle stature.
His legs and thighs were in the exactest proportion.
His shoulders were broad and brawny, and he had all the symptoms of strength, without the least clumsiness.
His hair was of a nut-brown colour, and displayed in wanton ringlets down his back.
His beard was rough only on his chin and upper lip, but his cheeks, in which his blood glowed,
were covered in a thick down. His eyes were dark and full of sweetness as of fire.
His nose was a little inclined to the Roman.
His teeth white and even, his lips full red and soft.
But, above all, his countenance had a tenderness joined with a sensibility inexpressible.
Add to this the most perfect neatness of his dress, and an air which, to those who had never seen a nobleman, would give an idea of nobility.
And that was the person who now presented himself before the Lady Booby. Who is it?
Joseph Andrews, madam.
Come in, Joseph.
You wish to see me, my lady?
Yes, Joseph, I did wish to see... To see you. Joseph, see... Sit down, Joseph.
Madam?
No. Remain standing. Joseph, I am sorry to hear... Come hither, Joseph. By me.
Yes, madam.
Joseph Andrews, I am sorry to hear that you behave so rudely to the maids that they cannot do their business in quiet.
Madam, I...
No. Come here. Here. Stand by me. Now, Joseph, another mistress might discard you for these offences, but I have compassion for your youth, and you are a handsome young fellow.
Madam, by all that is sacred, I have never, I swear, offered more than kissing to any maid in this house.
Kissing, Joseph? Kissing, Joseph? Do you call that no crime? Kissing, Joseph, is the prologue to the play. Oh, what would you think, Joseph, if I admitted you to kiss me?
I would sooner die, madam, than have such a thought.
And yet, Joseph, if I should admit you to such freedom, what would you think of me? And would you be contented with a kiss? Would not your inclinations be on fire by such a favour?
Madam, if they were, I hope I should be able to control them without suffering them to get the better of my virtue.
You have heard poets talk of the statue of surprise, and how surprise made one of the sons of Croesus speak, though he was dumb. But not from these, no, not from the inimitable pencil of my friend Hogarth, could you receive such an idea of surprise as that manifested by Lady Booby when she heard these words from Joseph's lips.
Your virtue! Your virtue! Have you the assurance to pretend that when a lady demeans herself to throw aside the rules of decency in order to honour you with the highest favour in her power, your virtue should resist her inclination? Your virtue? Did ever mortal hear of a man's virtue?
Madam, that man is the brother of Pamela, and would be ashamed that the chastity of his family, which is preserved in her, should be stained in him.
You impudent villain, sirrah! Get out of my sight at once, and prepare to set out this night, for I'll order your wages immediately, and you shall be stripped and turned away.
Madam, I'm sorry I offended your ladyship. I'm sure I never
Get
intended...
out!
So that evening, Joseph was summoned downstairs to Mr. Peter Pounce, the steward, to receive his wages. Now, Peter used to advance the servants their wages, not before they were due, but before they were payable. That is, perhaps half a year after they were due, at a modest premium.
This is a sorry business, Andrews.
Yes, Mr. Pounce.
Now, your emolument is £8 per annum, of which you have already dispatched £4 to your parents, which moneys I advance to you. Now, at 50% interest, that is £6. I see I also advanced you 10 shillings to buy a pipe to play upon. With interest, that is 15 shillings. Together with other small advances, that leaves you 12 shillings and sixpence there.
Thank you, Mr. Pounce.
Mr. Grogblossom.
Yes, Mr. Pounce.
See that Andrews is stripped of his livery and put out at once.
Yes, Mr. Pounce.
Yeah, but Mr.
At once.
Yes, Mr. Pounce. This way, Andrews.
Mr. Grogblossom, what shall I do? I've nothing to wear except my livery.
Never fear, Joseph. I have a spare livery you may borrow and welcome.
A spare? But how?
In truth, I have acquired 7 spare coats and 8 pairs of breeches. Not all my ladies' livery, naturally. I do indeed. And for dukes. Would you care for that?
'Tis a good travelling livery. A duke's man is always well respected on the road.
No, pray. Our own livery will suffice. Mr. Grogblossom, you're too kind. How shall I ever repay you?
Nothing, Joey, nothing. We shall miss you, dear Joey. You've been our inspiration and joy.
I shall miss you too, Mr. Grogblossom.
The moon shining very bright, Joseph determined to begin his journey to Booby Hall immediately. And indeed, there were other inducements to hasten him, which, unless you are a conjurer, you will not possibly guess. But they shall be laid open in our next, which also contains some very surprising adventures Joseph had on the road, scarce credible to those who have never travelled in a stagecoach.
In Episode 1 of Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding, dramatised in 4 parts by John Scotney, Fielding was played by John Rye, Joseph by Cornelius Garrett, Lady Booby by June Barry, and Parson Adams by John Franklin Robbins. William Fox was Sir Thomas Booby, Anne Jameson, Mrs. Slipslop, Peter Woodthorpe, Mr. Peter Pounce, Bill Wallace, Mr. Grogblossom, Tessa Worsley, Lady Tittle, Karen Ford, Lady Tattle, and Graham Blocky, the second footman. The music was composed and directed by Vic Gammon. The bassoonist was Mary Mobbs, the violinist Mary Carson, and the cittern was played by Vic Gammon. Joseph Andrews is directed in Bristol by Sean McLaughlin.